Today is going to be really fun. Actually, it was super fun putting it together. It's about a half hour, and as Michael said, my name is Kevin Baird. I serve as chairman at the nonprofit Center for College and Career Readiness, and we've been working with Meteor Education on a really interesting set of research questions. And so today we're talking about air quality and sanitation technology, and I like to think about this as really from NASA to nanotech. I'm going to be speaking about a new research report. It actually is out just December 8th of this year, and I'll send that to you. It's from the University of Wisconsin, and it's actually the implementation of the NASA-based technology I'm going to be talking about. And they were looking at the implementation and its impact on killing or reducing SARS-CoV-2. And they found that there was a 99.99% reduction or kill rate of the virus. But I'm not just going to talk about COVID today. I would note that we actually began this conversation before the novel coronavirus showed up, because we were interested in what was happening in environments, knowing that school reported asthma and student reported asthma were responsible for between 14 and 18% of student absenteeism. That's from the CDC. Literally, asthma and respiratory illness are the single leading cause of kids being out of school. So, well, we're probably all interested in these questions because of the COVID crisis. Let's remember that the trends began and will continue long after there's a vaccine around needing to make sure that our air quality is high in our schools. I want to begin by giving a little bit of an overview of Meteor Education and why we're interested in this kind of research and these studies. You know, Meteor essentially partners with educators to design, plan to scale, deliver, and install high impact learning environments. So if you think about a school building, if you dumped it upside down, everything that falls out, Meteor can provide. But Meteor is also concerned about the health, if you will, of that building, of that environment, of the air around us. And they partner with everyone from Dell to the Center for College and Career Readiness, University of Southern California, Rossier School of Education to do graduate level programming, and Casper Group. And I'm going to be talking about Casper technology today. And you see some of the really interesting environments that Meteor creates. Everything that we think about is actually based upon research, though. The science. In this case, I'm going to be talking about the science of the environment as it relates to air quality, sanitation. But the science begins in thinking about design. And you know that when it comes to architecture, we call this design meld, where interior design really meets the needs of real world classrooms. And I want to give you just a few examples of how the science of learning and the environment come together. So what you see on your screen is one of the first ever research-based environments that Meteor did. This was a few years ago. This is actually in Sarasota, Florida, where they were looking specifically at the science of learning, teaching and learning in STEM. And they wanted to increase participation among specific subsets of students and increase their scores. And they didn't have a lot of technology. This client actually built a curriculum, and then from that curriculum built an environment, and Meteor helped to build the custom, literally build it out, customized, knowing that there wasn't a lot of tech, and their results were crazy. I mean, their scores went through the roof, but it was literally the science of teaching and learning in that environment. In another example, so Meteor does a lot of work in cafes and cafeterias, but it's not just about creating a really interesting looking, fun, bright cafeteria. It's about the science of how you increase participation in lunch programs. And actually their chief scientist there comes from Walt Disney World, one of the largest providers of food programming in the world. Literally, they monetize every single space if you've been to one of their parks. And they have a track record here of increasing school lunch program participation by 40 to 50%. And that's literally the science of the environment and the human activity. The media centers are designed with the science that comes from the research in the American Association of School Librarians. Even really strange things, new things. I'm talking about today, literally NASA technology and nanotechnology, but Meteor works with Dell to look at the science of learning and esports. And this is an esports gallery, or the science of leadership development when they're looking at outdoor spaces. And by the way, we know that right now, the science of COVID and what we are going through, will have a dramatic impact, a lasting impact on school design and on what we do inside of schools. And we are working with a subpanel of architects. They work with the AIA to develop a white paper around even what that looks like architecturally. But every previous epidemic has led to lasting changes in the built environment. For instance, after the Spanish flu epidemic, wipeable tiles like subway tiles became ubiquitous because people realized that, well, you could see this kind of infectious bacteria and dirt on the walls. You may also have seen, there was a recent article that modern radiator design actually came out of the Spanish flu era because they designed them because they wanted to be able to heat a room while the window was open. So you will all get these slides, and I would just call your attention. There's a really interesting article that I linked to here from Slate magazine talking about post-pandemic style. But not everything is about COVID. Not everything is new. The World Health Organization estimated that 30% of new and remodeled buildings have air quality issues. The National Education Association found that 1/3 of American schools had 6 school symptoms. Again, we know that asthma and other respiratory issues are the #1 reason for student and teacher absence. That's from the Centers for Disease Control. And sick classrooms can be singular, it can be one classroom, or it can be part of a systemic failure. And literally almost any kind of materials, any FF&E, furniture, fixtures, and equipment brought in can have a serious impact. Everything from VOCs, those are volatile organic compounds, or ozone in the copier room, to different kinds of plants, which is kind of interesting, to even perfumes or different kinds of fragrances that people bring in on their skin. So we're very interested in the science of the environment, including the science of the air quality in the environment and sanitation on the surfaces. The reality is that all of us right now, we've been working like crazy to follow all of these new protocols, but it just takes one missed surface. And by the way, we might not be able to miss a surface when you think about the air. What are we doing about the air around us? The hard truth is that you can't clean your way. You can't clean your way out of COVID-19. You can't clean your way out of flu. You can't clean your way out of asthma. We've never been able to do that. We started looking, as this project was unfolding, at what are the strategies that people have been employing, again, before the novel coronavirus came around, but now looking at those strategies as well. And where do we fail? How is it that asthma is the leading reason for absence in schools? And I want you to consider, you have masks. Yeah, they're effective, but they're a communication barrier. Plastic shields are another surface to clean. Temperature checks, of course, for COVID can be unrevealing for kids that are not symptomatic. Hand sanitizing and washing, ground zero since I was a kid, since you were a kid, and we all know how well we did as kids, right? No matter how much you clean and disinfect, that surface, literally the minute you walk away, is no longer sanitized, right? And even in our advanced implementations using UV light or HEPA filters that clean the air before it enters the room, the minute that air enters the room, it is again contaminated. And what we found as we were looking at the research was the real issue we realized is that all of the current strategies are episodic, they're not continuous, and they are reliant on some kind of human compliance. So how does this really work today? What does it look like? This is an example of how we literally clean air today in almost all of our spaces in schools. But it's not how we clean air, by the way, in a hospital or a medical center. And the technology I'm going to talk about is hospital and medical center technology that's just now coming to be used in schools. But this is how it usually works. I bring air in, and somewhere there's a filter, there's an ionization system, right? There's a HEPA, there's UV, and I zap everything in that air. And at that moment, it's clean. And then the air goes into the room. And the minute the air is in the room, it starts picking up bacteria and pathogens or viruses and spreading them around. Literally, that clean air ends up becoming the enemy of sanitation or cleanliness. And if you are near the return, you actually could get everything from the room. And if you look at, I found this was fascinating, thinking about COVID. The very first study, this was a study that actually went to the World Health Organization, where they were finding that COVID was airborne, came from a restaurant in Wuhan, China. And what they found was that there was a table, and it was a table of folks whom they knew were infected with a virus. And they were sitting near where the air conditioner was. So the air was coming out and blowing over them. And it picked up the virus, and it spread the virus to many people throughout the restaurant right towards the air return. That's what I mean by episodic filtration. It's not continuously clean. It was clean for a minute, but literally that air movement, no matter how many times you're cycling through, literally carries pathogens around. Now, I could have something better than that that worked all the time, but if something is 99% effective theoretically, but humans only do it, say 75%, the actual effectiveness is less than that, 74.5 or whatnot. So I got to think about, how do I take the human factor out as well? So as we were looking into this problem, we started asking ourselves, not only could we have safer use of indoor space, but also how could we do that more naturally? And here's why. We started hearing from educators. We started looking at some of the science where folks were really concerned about alcohols and other really harsh chemicals inside of our learning spaces. Again, we're talking about asthma, but we have other kids that have different kinds of allergies and sensitivities. And it was interesting how the research came together, because we found that there are really 4 elements that you need to understand and be thinking of. You have to have a continuous process. Everything has to be continuously disinfected. But the protection has to actually kill the pathogen on contact. It can't just blow it around. It has to kill it. That's what we call an active kill. Obviously, whatever we're doing has to be safe. That's where the natural comes in, right? I mean, I've got kids there. And by the way, it has to be safe to use indoors. It's not enough to like fumigate a school at night and my kids come in and an hour later, I'm awash in whatever I'm awash in, whether it's things that are going to light up my asthma or COVID or different kinds of bacteria, flu, or you name it. And whatever I do, it has to be easy to use. As we looked at those strategies, we found Casper. And this was really interesting because we couldn't really find great case studies in a lot of schools. What we found were case studies in medical centers, in surgical suites, in neonatal ICUs. And that's where the Casper systems were being used. But we found that there were a few schools that were actually implementing it. And the way it worked was actually the way nature works. So this is the technology. And this technology was literally developed by NASA in the 1960s. And Casper's got an award from them for their use of that technology in medical centers. So there's this thing called hydroperoxides. You've heard of this as hydrogen peroxide. You might have rinsed your mouth out with it. But hydroperoxides are literally Mother Nature's environmentally friendly cleaning agent. You know how you go out after a thunderstorm and it smells super clean? Well, the combination of lightning, water, and sun creates these ions which clean the air. And typically outdoors, you have this level of hydroperoxides that's between 0.01 to 0.03 parts per million, all right? Well, what the Casper technology does, where the technology that NASA created in the 60s, was essentially to do this thing called photocatalytic oxidation, all right? And by the way, I'm going to suggest to you that as a next step, we'll get you on with a scientist. We'll get you on with educators who are actually using these pieces. But essentially, this technology takes your air, it takes the humidity in the air, and runs it through the system to use these hydroperoxides to destroy super itty bitty particles. And when I mean itty bitty particles, I love that. I know that's a highly technical phrase, right? They can destroy particles as small as 0.001 microns. To give you a sense of how that's different from like a HEPA filter will only capture things as small as 0.3 microns. And this is why this technology is used successfully in surgical suites or in NICUs, because it can kill things that are really super small. So the device actually takes in oxygen and water molecules in the ambient air and uses that gaseous hydrogen peroxide to kill at this very, very small level, all of these really small viruses or bacterias. And as a matter of fact, the EPA has said that this is a very effective infection control strategy. The thing was, it wasn't available in schools before because it was a big system, very expensive system, et cetera. Now, because hydroperoxides kill really super small things, not only does it kill coronavirus, and again, I'm going to send you that study just from the University of Wisconsin, but it kills influenza and MRSA and listeria and E. coli. Again, these are all the reasons why you use it in a medical setting. It also kills mold and fungi and yeast, and even helps, for instance, with smoke remediation or odor-causing volatile organic compounds, and even is effective in some of the problems with really small microorganisms. So I want you to know that this technology, again, the use of technology that essentially does what Mother Nature does, using hydroperoxides to kill really small viruses, bacteria, et cetera. The research is really amazing. It's to the level that the clinical community requires. It shows that influenza, so flu, was reduced nearly 100%, 99.93%. MRSA, that's methicillin-resistant staphylococcus, was reduced 99.98%. Bacteria, 99.98%. So forget COVID. I want you to think about all the things that light up your kids' asthma. This is super effective, all right? Now, I will give you, you can see the studies from healthcare, you can see the studies from education, but I'm suggesting, I really hope that if you're interested in finding out how this technology could work inside of your schools, that you actually talk with an educator, all right? Or you might even want to talk with someone from healthcare, and we have those references so you could speak with them specifically. But you should know that the technology, and this is the real innovation, there's an industrial set of technology. It can go in a induct. The medic system is recommended for really super pathogen-rich environments, those medical environments. But if you see down here in the left-hand corner, Casper Compact, this is a device that it doesn't even have to be purchased. It can be leased, and it can be put in a classroom for very little money. And I think that if we look at the innovation in schools, and some schools, by the way, are using like the industrial induct systems, the Casper Compact is a way where I could really start to have an impact in my school for not a lot of money, and also not a lot of impact on my building, right? I'm not messing around with the HVAC system. Lastly, you should know that there's even a system for transit, Casper Transit, which is meant for instance, like buses and subways and those kinds of things. So that's one specific kind of technology. The PCO technology, that's what it's called. It was developed by NASA in the 1960s. 2016 is when Casper Group first started in the US working in the healthcare industry. It's been in Europe a little bit longer. And in 2019, they received an award from NASA for their Innovation of Excellence Award. And just now, just in 2020, we're getting this out into schools. But that's why it's amazing. But you might like, well, why haven't I heard about this yet, Kevin? Because it's new in our market. All right. If you talk to, and actually I would tell you that on the references, on the reference sheet, there are a number of folks that I was asked not to share because they are literally infection specialists in medical centers today. And you can imagine why. Those people are really busy. So I'm not going to give you their names, but here is an example of a person who's saying, listen, this is the kind of technology you want to have. Now, that's NASA. That's literally using what happens in nature to kill viruses, to kill molds, all of these kinds of items. So good for COVID, but also good for things like asthma. But let's face it, I'm not always just interested in the air. I'm also interested in surfaces, including my hands, right? So we were doing the research, and we were in a completely different conversation. And we were introduced to a person who said, well, have you heard about what's happening with nanotechnology and killing viruses and bacteria? And I'm like, nanotechnology? What are you talking about? Continuous surface pathogen reduction and hand sanitizer. And what they helped me understand is that there's this super big shift in thinking, that instead of having a chemical kill, like using alcohols or using aldehydes or ozone to kill things, which, by the way, can have an impact on humans, or I might not even be able to be in the space when that's used, or it can leach into me, or it can even kill some things, but actually lead to resistant bacterias. That because of nanotechnology, there's this change to the idea of a mechanical kill. And the best way, I have a picture, but the best way I can explain this is I want you to imagine on a molecular level, a sword or knives, and they puncture the virus or they puncture the bacteria and they kill it. And this is what's known as a mechanical kill. So one of the reasons this is interesting is that in various kinds of facilities, and they use this in medical facilities as well, and also restaurants, schools too, they're trying to clean as many as 7 and 8 times a day. Well, not only is that super expensive, but if you think about taking harsh chemicals into a classroom 7 or 8 times a day, I don't know about you, but I don't want to do that. But also I have an impact on my students. I have an impact on the human beings in that space, and it's super expensive. The nanotechnology, by the way, it's called It's Nanode, is long-lasting protection because it's not chemical. It's literally at the molecular level, like putting all these little knives out there, all right? And it lasts 30 days on surfaces and 8 hours on the skin. And this is how it works. So I could read the slide here by talking about an engineered molecules of silicon dioxide, which form a strong covalent bond, which if you know Meteor's CEO, Bill Latham, he loves that stuff. He's a chemist by trade. But I'm going to make it easier to understand. If you look at the picture and you see the picture of that board and it has all those nails, imagine that those nails are really attractive, okay? They're kind of charged and they are attracting viruses and they're attracting molds and they're attracting them right onto the spear, right onto the nail and through it. And so it pierces it, it punctures it. That's literally what the nanotechnology does. And this is the picture of the molecular level, okay? When you apply it, it's a kind of a spray. It forms a cross-linked, okay, so it's strong, it stays there, monolayer of these hydrophobic nanospikes. And hydrophobic means it actually resists water and it resists oils. And that's really important because you don't want to have water and oils and other things getting into that surface, okay? That bacteria and the viruses are drawn to those nanospikes because they have a positive charge, and the spikes pull the virus or the bacteria down. And literally at the bottom, it's represented here by the brown ammonium compound, literally zaps them. It electrocutes them. And that's how this technology works. By the way, registered with the FDA, approved by the EPA, a wide variety of different analyses and third-party reports about all the things like E. coli and Listeria, Staphylococcus that are killed in this way. But it's not a chemical kill, it's a mechanical kill. And because it's a mechanical kill, this material stays on the surface up to a month and in your hands 8 hours. And by the way, if you want, you can talk to folks in schools who have started using this. This was a really interesting case study. This was from October, Stevensville Public Schools, where they were noting that they've had reports, they had kids that did have COVID-19. And they were able, they've been using the nanotechnology to protect what happens in their classrooms. And they actually had no transmission of the virus inside of their school. And they were actually able to stay open, that was okay, and have a strong educational environment because they were able to make sure that they were not having transmission inside of the school. Now that's one data point, but there are a variety of other schools who have been using this technology. And again, it's not just about COVID. I want you to think about the number one reason our kids are out of school is because of asthma and other respiratory ailments. And by the way, if you are in a district and you have kids who are in poor environments or older buildings, you know what I mean when I say that they are more susceptible, they are more likely to be out of school because of things that we're catching. So the nanotech, it has been shown that there's a reduction of asthma. There was actually a study in Dubai of this technology. Reduction of respiratory illness. There was an October 2019 study that showed a reduction of infection at a US hospital over 12 months. And because it's not a chemical kill, it does not contribute to antibiotic resistant bacteria. And that's an important element as well for this kind of approach. So their system is easy. They sanitize their space, your space. And then after that first sanitization happens, they put the barrier there, they spray it on, that's going to last 30 days in the classroom. And then they give for all of the folks in your school the FDA approved 8-hour nanotech hand sanitizer. That's how that works. Every single thing about the environment in front of you has been designed using science. The science of ergonomics and how people are sitting, the science of collaboration and learning, the actual tabletops, because we want to make sure that the tabletop doesn't actually, it's not porous, okay, for different kinds of laboratory settings, different kinds of chemicals. But the air in this particular environment has also been engineered to be continuously clean using the Casper technology. And you can use the nanotechnology to make sure that instead of having to clean that surface 7 or 8 times a day, literally once a month, nanotech lasts once a month. Now you're going to clean it more often than that, but that's literally the science behind it. Everything is scientifically engineered. And that's really kind of where we sit. We sit at the science between the environment and learning, the environment and sanitation, the environment and cleanliness, even the environment and mental health. We actually deploy software that allows you to see literally in about 30 seconds, the social emotional needs of your students, even if they're hungry. So as we think about going from our schools to space age cleanliness, I'm going to suggest to you, I'm going to send you these slides. I will send you the research. Be forewarned, it's research. I mean, it is clinical research, so it's hard to get through. So if you want, I'll give you some contact information as well. We can hook you up to talk with a scientist, and I'm going to go to the chat here if you have questions, or connect with an educator who's literally using this technology in their environment. And by the way, because Meteor really wants to make sure that schools have an opportunity to use this technology, Meteor is offering a independent third-party evaluation of a pilot classroom. If you want to try this technology out, and they'll do that on their dime. So you can try the technology out in your space, and they'll actually get a third party in there to demonstrate whether or not it is cleaning your space. All right. I would note that this is part of our 14 standards for high impact learning environment programs. That is part of an initiative that includes the white paper that will come out with the American Institutes of Architects. Also, the Association for Learning Environments, where we're looking at what do we need to be thinking about now to make sure that that environment is a high impact for learning, a high impact for teaching, high impact for safety. So that's the presentation. And I'm going to go here to the chat. All right. And see here if we have any questions. Chris Martin is from Colorado. Great. Are there any questions? So are we looking for wholesale resellers, or is our goal to go direct to consumers? So Meteor can sell to anyone. I mean, this technology, we're happy to make available, whether you want to resell into a marketplace or to a school. We want to make sure, our mission is really to make sure that schools are aware of that. But Chris, if you are a reseller, or we have, by the way, we are national partners with the Association for Educational Service Agencies, a number of folks that we partner with to get the word out and get the technology out. That's fine. So let's make sure that we connect. You bet. Any other questions, either about the technology, something you're wondering about? I know that one of my colleagues was giving a presentation recently, and a superintendent said, listen, I would literally buy this for all of my schools tomorrow, but I have a community that is, they're kind of split. I have folks who are anti-maskers, and I have folks who are maskers, and all of those kinds of things. And I need to make sure that all of those folks are being well served. And so I want to make sure that for you, your community, your school, or whoever we need to get in the room, this technology isn't just about COVID. This technology is literally about making sure that your kids are in your classrooms before, during, and after there is a vaccine. We'll get you the slides, we'll get you the research reports, and anything that you need, please let us know. Chris, we'll hope to connect. Michael, back to you.
Kevin, one side benefit of the Get Nanoed hand sanitizer that we use. So I use that at home for my kids, for my family, and the alcohol stuff really dries your hands out, but the nano stuff, because that bond it creates with your skin, it really makes your skin softer. So the drying, the cracking, things like that just don't happen anymore.
That is true, but that is true. It's also, I'm thinking about, you could do a little commercial about, soft hands, but that is true actually. So
that's
excellent.
Right. Actually, Chris Martin has a question. If these are bipolar ionizations, or is this ions? Before we wrap up here.
Chris, that is a question I want to actually have one of my science team specifically answer. I believe that the answer is ions, but I want to let a scientist answer that. I can speak to the scientists, to the science. I play a scientist on the webinar, but I am an expert in the implementation. So we have your contact information. I will have someone reply to you.